here. I was thinking about our thoughts for the year and some of the things that we were encouraged to focus by the leadership. And we start off the year talking about the Great Commission in Matthew chapter 28 and going out and spreading the gospel and sharing the gospel. And we've been talking a lot lately about God and understanding God and who God is and Jesus and understanding how to walk with Him, because that's part of being able to do that. And this morning, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be returning more to some thoughts on personal evangelism and reaching out. And I was really thinking about the title for the lesson this morning. I was really wanting to capture that intellectual energy that's required for doing this kind of work. So this is the title I came up with. Hey, it's on my level anyway. Okay. I want us to really think about evangelism just for a minute, just openly, before we get into a text. And I want you to think about what comes through your mind when you hear that word. And when you hear that word and someone says, evangelism or outreach or sharing the gospel, and maybe a couple things come to mind, and we're going to kind of outline a couple that come to my mind anyway. The word evangelism brings a lot of fear. It almost just induces fear. Okay, what's He going to ask me to do? What am I going to have to do? Am I going to be required to do something? I don't want to be uncomfortable. And we go through a whole litany of thoughts. And maybe you're that person this morning that's already done that. And if you are, just bear with me, because I want us to kind of unload all those preconceived ideas and try to start from just a simple place, obviously by the title. Maybe when we hear the word evangelism, we think of programs. There's been countless number of programs developed within the church, without the church, and everything else. Neighborhood evangelism, door-knocking campaigns, videos and DVDs that are created just for that purpose and sent out. Who knows how much money is spent every year by churches and church leaders and Bible school teachers and so forth, spending on trying to teach people how to evangelize and to share the gospel. Maybe we think of, when we think of the word evangelism, we think of excuses. We've already got in our mind, I'm busy. You better not ask me to do much because I don't have time for that. And I don't have time for this. Maybe we come up with all kinds of excuses. Probably because of the first one. We're afraid of it. We're afraid of what it means. And maybe that's why we go there. But I was thinking about something when I thought of the word. What if we're just overthinking it? I had an opportunity while we were up at Ladd's to talk to a guy who was had a booth set up there. He was from Waterford, Michigan, I think. He was a preacher up there, evangelist up there. And he was sharing a program that they had developed and so forth based on Matthew 28. I haven't read his book yet. It's like many books on my shelf. It's good intentions and no carry-through on that one. I've got so much other stuff going on. But we had a good little an interesting conversation. He was talking about principles and helping people understand evangelism. That kind of spurred some of these thoughts. But I was thinking, we've got a whole book here. We've got another book over here. We've got a DVD series. We've got this website and that website, all to figure out how to do what Jesus asked us to do. Maybe we're just overthinking it. So this morning, what I want us to do is just see something very simple to start with. Now, hopefully we can build on this next couple of weeks, but it just starts with hey. It doesn't end there. Understand that we're not talking about an ending place, but a starting place. Maybe we rethink the way we approach evangelism and see evangelism and how it works and what's going on, is to start with the idea that it starts with just recognizing that somebody is there. Now, this is not going to be true with every situation we come across, but there are so many people in this world who are hurting, who are left out, who feel neglected, that the world has come down on them hard, if you want to put it that way. They're fighting just to be. And we can change their world by just saying, hey, I see you there. Now, I'm not saying that as a pattern. I'm saying that as an idea. I don't want you to walk out of here thinking evangelism. The next person, hey, I see you there. That's not what I'm going after. but the principle, okay? What if we just said, hey, and in our minds we understand that the evangelism process has already begun. See, where our fear gets is the idea when I start talking about Jesus, then something, you're already there. You've already started the process. You might as well keep walking with it. What if we got in our mind that just the idea of reaching out is the beginning of evangelism, because that's what it is? I want you to turn with me to the book of John in chapter 5 as we consider this man at the pool of Bethesda. And if we remember the story, and we're going to look at the story, so if you're not familiar with it, hopefully you will be here in a moment. Jesus does a miracle here. It's an opportunity that the religious leaders and his opposition take to try to get rid of him. Now, we're not going to have time to get past that into all that, but we're interested in the actual conversation between Jesus and this man. It starts up in verse 1, and that's where we'll start. John chapter 5. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porches. And in these lay a great multitude of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped in first, after the stirring of the water, was made well of whatever disease he had. Now, as we're reading this, and I know that's a very interesting detail, and there's a lot of debate over whether that was a kind of a superstition that they had, or if that was actually taking place. But I want you to let go of that, because it really doesn't matter for our conversation this morning, okay? If you want to study that together, we can try to study it out a little bit, though it's a lot of hearsay on that. But that's why they were there. That's what's important. These 5 porches, which would just be kind of flat areas of stone that they were lying on, waiting for the water to turn, because they thought, their hope was that if I can get in there first, when the waters turn, I'll be made well. Verse 5. Now a certain man was there who had an infirmity 38 years. I always point this out with miracles that are done. You never see... I'm sure there were people who had the flu or something like that. They came across Jesus and were healed. That's not what's recorded, though, is it? It's things that people know. People can see this person, have known this person for 38 years dealing with this infirmity. It's not just some stranger that comes on the scene and he's miraculously healed and everybody doesn't know who he is, and that it could be, I guess, faked or something like that. This man has dealt with this for 38 years. Verse 6. And when Jesus saw him lying there, he knew that he had already been in that condition a long time. He said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" Now, I'm going to use some words here that aren't there because I'm trying to get a concept over. I want you to look at what Jesus saw. He saw this man. I'm that person that goes into Walmart, and if I'm going there for milk and for bread or whatever I'm going for, I guess it's snowing if I'm going in for milk and bread, but if we're going in for something particular, I'm beelining to whatever it is, I'm grabbing that and going right to the next person. There could be 2,000 people in that store at that time, and I won't see a one of them. That's me. I'm just kind of that way by nature. It's called an introvert, by the way. My wife will meet everybody she's ever met in her entire life in that one store. Maybe not that bad. But I don't pay attention to people. I have to force myself to pay attention sometimes to notice that there are people living and doing and being around me. I know that's a part of my character. I have to push myself out of that. But that's what we're seeing right off the start. It starts with understanding, hey, there's a person there. And saying, hey, I see you there. I don't know how many people pass by that pool. And I want you to think for a second, just if you were among that population the best you can, and you know that all those sick people are there and all those people hurting, and you got to put it in perspective, all of those people, every one of them would have been a beggar. There's no safety net as far as a welfare program and so forth in that day. There's supposed to be as far as food, but even that had been corrupted at that time. All those people were beggars. And how many people, knowing that, would either walk by, never looking, or find a different route through the city? See, evangelism has to start with the idea of being able to see people where they are and the condition they're in. Not to judge someone. That's not what we're talking about, passing a judgment. Oh, that guy's in bad shape and that girl's doing okay. And that's not what we're getting at. But just see them there. Verse 6 again. When Jesus saw him lying there. Now he knew he had been that way. Now I don't know if that's a suggestion that he knew this man personally, or if he knew this because he knows a lot more than the rest of us know. But he speaks to him. I want you to consider that he doesn't come up to this man and understand this is Jesus. He has an ability to heal him miraculously. I don't have that ability. I understand that. This is different. But I want you to get a hold of the concept. If Jesus is our model and our teacher and the one we want to be like, he notices him. He walks up to him. He speaks to him. Hey, I see you there. He sees that he has a need and he talks about his need. I'm sure it's been successful, and I know some people here that have had success with programs where you knock on someone's door and you look at someone you've never met and you say, would you know, nothing doubting, if Jesus came right now, you'd go home to be with you. But my experience is every time you do that, people put up walls right off the bat, especially in our culture today, because evangelism has become marketing. Not because those people who are doing that are trying to market, that's not what I'm getting at, but in the minds and in the hearts of the people out there, it's just another marketing scheme. It's just another person trying to get my time and my money. Are you following me? But if we walk up to that person in their life, where they're living in their life, and say, hey, how's it going? We see them working on something and say, hey, man, can I give you a hand? That's what Jesus does. He doesn't start off saying, do you know if you're going to heaven and hell? He doesn't even start off saying, do you know who the Son of God is? Or if you know who God is. He sees this man in his need and he starts a conversation. Now it's going to go places. But it starts with a hey. I know that's not exactly what Jesus said. He didn't say hey. He saw him there and says, do you want to be made well? Now if we continue with the story, we know that Jesus is going to make him well. And we'll do just that. Verse 7. The sick man answered him, Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool. But when the water is stirred up, but while I am coming, another steps down before me. And Jesus said to him, Rise, take up your bed, and walk. And immediately the man was made well, took up his bed, and walked. And that day was the Sabbath. And of course, then we go into the story where they get upset because he healed a man on the Sabbath. And that's a whole other form of sadness, I guess. I want you to consider another one with me. It goes, we just go back a chapter, one that we've talked about in the past few weeks a couple times, at least alluded to. John chapter 4. Samaritan at the well, the woman at the well. In verse 4 it says, but he needed to go through Samaria. So he came to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. And now Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, sat thus by the well. It was about the 6th hour. It's about midday. A woman of Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, Good lady, let me tell you about my church. Now, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to be too silly. But that's not what he said, is it? Verse 6. He came to the 6th hour, verse 7. A woman of Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Do you know where you're going if you died today?" I'm not trying to put down programs and stuff. I hope that you understand that. If you can find one that works within your personality and so forth, that can be very powerful. But I'm just saying, sometimes we just make it harder than it needs to be. And we're going to talk about other aspects of this next week, but that's not what he said to her either, is it? In verse 7, a woman of Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." He was thirsty. He just had a conversation with her. Let's put this in perspective. If anybody else would have came up to that woman at that well at that time, she would have not existed. Nobody would have spoke to her. Matter of fact, and we know all the cultural and traditional things that made that a taboo, and his disciples get all weary and get all crazy because he's speaking to this woman. They wouldn't have spoke to her. It would have been like she didn't exist. But he sees her. He says, "Hey, I know you're there. Can you give me a drink of water?" Now, obviously, I'm adding that first part, trying to make a point. The point is that's where the evangelism started. Can you give me a drink? Do you need to be made well? Do you need help carrying that bag? Jesus just said, "I see you there." Where to go from there? I mean, that's evangelism too, don't get me wrong. But the process starts with acknowledging people. I can tell you from past experience that I am no expert when it comes to evangelism. That may not be what you're expecting me to say this morning. I've tried different ways and different approaches, had success and then had failure. I've tried to exchange people in the best loving way I know how. Sometimes my personality doesn't jive with their personality and things get shut down quickly. And sometimes you have an opportunity, but it never seems to bring forth fruit. There's all kinds of things that come in together, but we don't need to bring all of that to bear before we even get to hay. We just need to free ourselves from the idea that I have to convert someone in order for evangelism to have happened. No, what I need to be able to do is share with them in the moment they're living so they have any kind of interest in what I may have to say. I'm going to leave you with this thought, and we're going to kind of wrap things up, but I want you to leave you with this thought. If you were trying to honor somebody, just give them honor in the best way you knew how. What might come to mind? How would you do it? I've done several funerals, and I've sat with many people in times of hurting. And I've seen people get up and share personally about their loved one or their friend or something like that, in expression to honor them. And you know what happens? They get up and they usually greet a crowd. Some of them they know, some of them they don't know as well. And in all their pain and all their struggle and all the things that they're going through, all they do is tell a bit of that person's story. That's evangelism. Being able to tell them a piece, the story of Jesus. We're going to know really quickly if they are interested or not. And if they're not interested, maybe they'll be interested at another time. But we overcomplicate things way too many times. And I'm not saying that inviting someone to church is a bad thing. Please do that. or if you have the opportunity to talk to someone about where their destination is going, that's fine. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying get rid of the fear of just saying, hey, I recognize that you're there. And I want to tell you something about somebody that means something to me. I think it'll be helpful to you. I want to turn to Matthew chapter 28, and we'll end there. Jesus says, go into all the world. And He sends His disciples, and that includes us. Verse 19. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you, and lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Now, my Greek is not the best. So, if I need to be corrected, someone can step in and correct me. But my understanding of the expression, go therefore and make disciples, is the tense means as you go. In other words, it's already accepted that they are going to go make disciples. So that's their desire. And Jesus is charging them how to do it as they go. And that needs to be ours too. We need to recognize that we have the opportunity to share Jesus everywhere we go with anybody we meet. But it may simply be saying, hey, I see you there. And having a good conversation about whatever they're going through. And leaving with the idea, hey, I'd like to talk to you about someone I think that might be a help to you. This morning, maybe it'd be a help to you to hear that same story, same message. Jesus came into this world and He put off all the blessing, all the highness, all the exaltedness that He had in heaven to come to this lowly earth. He put on flesh. For the first time in His eternal existence, He couldn't be in all places at all times. He put on flesh, and for the first time in His existence, He felt hunger and thirst. And had to deal with temptation. And He dealt with those things. And He dealt with those things without sin. And He lived a life that was a model for us. But He lived that life with the whole intention of giving that life for you and me. And when that fateful day came where He went to that cross and He shed His blood for our sins, He did it with pain and anguish in His heart. But the Hebrew writer said, with great joy. Knowing that He gave us a path to something that we didn't have without Him. And this morning we want to encourage you to consider that. And if you've not obeyed the gospel, we want to give you the opportunity to let that need be known. If you need the prayers of the church, or we can be of assistance in any way, we want to encourage you to let your needs be known as we stand together and sing a song of invitation.